Hello and welcome to another episode of the Halloween Podcast. You're listening to episode 16 of The Dark Record, where we uncover history's strangest and most unsettling mysteries. Tonight, we travel to Dumbarton, Scotland, to a Victorian stone bridge with a reputation that has baffled scientists, locals, and dog owners for decades. Since the 1950s, hundreds of dogs have leapt from its parapets into the gorge below. Some survived the 40-foot fall, many did not, and almost all of them jumped from the very same spot. The next entry into the dark record, the Overtoun Bridge. Let's begin. By design, Overtoun Bridge is beautiful, arch stonework spanning a wooded ravine, part of the grand estate of Overtoun House. It rises 40 feet above the Overtoun Burn, a narrow stream that cuts through the hills just outside Dumbarton. From above, the view is picturesque: rolling green countryside, thick patches of forest, and the distant outline of the Kilpatrick Hills. To anyone passing by, it looks like the sort of bridge you might stop to admire, not fear. Yet for decades, fear is exactly what the bridge has inspired. Generations of locals have given it another name: the Dog Suicide Bridge. Since the 1950s, stories have circulated of dogs who approached the bridge normally, calm and controlled, only to freeze, fix their gaze on something unseen, and suddenly leap over the parapet. What makes the accounts so chilling is their consistency. Almost all of the jumps have happened at the same spot, on the right-hand side, between the final two parapets. For many owners, the behavior seemed entirely out of character. Well-trained collies, retrievers, and Labradors, dogs that had never bolted or lunged before, suddenly acted as if pulled by an invisible force. Those that survived the 40-foot fall often tried to leap again if led back across, as though the compulsion had not worn off. By now, dozens of deaths are confirmed, and locals estimate hundreds more incidents never formally recorded. The story spread far beyond Dumbarton. Dog owners from other parts of Scotland made detours to see the bridge. Some out of morbid curiosity, others out of genuine fear. Journalists noted how residents spoke about the site in hushed tones, warning visitors to leash their pets tightly before crossing. To many, Overtoun was no ordinary bridge. It was a place where the everyday rules of nature seemed to break down. The tragedy of it struck deeper because of what was lost. These weren't just animals. They were companions, working dogs, beloved family members. To watch them leap without warning, to stand powerless as they vanished over the stone wall, left scars owners carried for the rest of their lives. Accounts in local papers describe people breaking down in tears on the roadside, unable to comprehend why their pet had acted that way. Over time, the grief became part of the bridge's identity, woven into its reputation as a place where something strange and sorrowful lingered. So when people speak of Overtoun Bridge, it isn't just the numbers that make it frightening. It's the pattern, the precision, the fact that even the survivors seem compelled to try again. Whether explained by science, by folklore, or by something stranger still, Overtoun has earned its dark reputation. And as the stories piled up, the bridge's name traveled further, securing its place as one of Scotland's most unsettling mysteries. The story of Overtoun Bridge begins not with tragedy, but with wealth and ambition. In the mid-19th century, James White, a successful chemical manufacturer, purchased land outside Dumbarton and built an estate known as Overtoun House. His son, John Campbell White, later expanded the property, commissioning architect Henry Ernest Milner to design a bridge across the Overtoun Burn, a wooded gorge that cut through the estate's drive. Completed in 1895, Overtoun Bridge was everything a Victorian structure was meant to be: ornate, durable, and imposing. Its stone arches spanned the ravine with elegance, while its parapets framed views of the surrounding hills and forests. To visitors, it was a landmark of beauty. To the family, it was a practical way to link their home to the main road. But even before the dogs began leaping, Overtoun carried a reputation that made it different from other bridges. The surrounding area had long been tied to Celtic folklore, where certain locations were known as thin places. In these spots, it was said, the barrier between the physical world and the spiritual world grew weaker. Strange feelings, visions, or otherworldly encounters were often reported in such places. Overtoun itself became one of these thin places. Locals spoke of a heaviness in the air, of unexplained chills, of the land itself feeling unsettled. Overtoun House, which looms over the bridge, added to the atmosphere. By the 20th century, the grand estate had fallen into disrepair, its Gothic design feeding whispers of haunting. Stories of a White Lady of Overtoun spread through Dumbarton, a spectral figure seen drifting near the bridge, tied in local lore to grief and loss. Witnesses claimed the White Lady had been seen as far back as the early 20th century, often described as a pale, grieving figure dressed in white, moving silently near the bridge or appearing in the windows of Overtoun House. Some said she was the spirit of Lady Overtoun herself, mourning the loss of her husband and bound to the estate by sorrow. Reports varied. Children walking home from school told of glimpsing her across the parapets, while others swore they felt a sudden chill or the sensation of being watched as they crossed the bridge alone. By the 1930s and 40s, the stories were common enough that locals spoke of the White Lady almost casually, as though her presence was simply part of the landscape. To many in Dumbarton, Overtoun was not just a grand house and a bridge. It was a place where grief had taken on a form, lingering long after the people who inspired it were gone. So when dogs began leaping from the bridge in the 1950s, many saw it as more than coincidence. In their eyes, the bridge's dark reputation had simply shifted from myth to reality. It was no longer just a place where the veil felt thin. It had become a place where lives were taken, one leap at a time.
When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like aloe or Skims, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. With Shop Pay, that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts are going abandoned and way more sales happening. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell whatever your customers are scrolling or strolling on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Skims uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing facility, he knows keeping the line up and running is a top priority. That's why he chooses Grainger. Because when a drive belt gets damaged, Grainger makes it easy to find the exact specs for the replacement product he needs. And next-day delivery helps ensure he'll have everything in place and running like clockwork. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
As the deaths mounted, the question grew harder to ignore. Why were dogs leaping from Overtoun Bridge? To the owners, it seemed like their pets were acting under some unseen command. To investigators, it became a puzzle of nature, environment, and perception. One of the most prominent explanations came from animal behaviorists. They noted that most of the victims were long-snouted breeds: collies, retrievers, Labradors, dogs bred for their keen sense of smell. Below the bridge, among the rocks and undergrowth, lived mink and other small animals that gave off strong, musky odors. In controlled tests, many dogs showed a powerful attraction to mink scent. The theory suggested that the dogs caught the smell on the bridge and, in their excitement, lunged toward it, never realizing there was a 40-foot drop between them and the source. Another possibility had to do with perspective. From human eye level, the parapets of Overtoun Bridge are waist high. From a dog's view, especially one with its head close to the ground, the stone walls could make the landscape beyond appear like solid, continuous ground. If a dog scented prey and saw what looked like open fields ahead, it might leap forward, unaware of the deadly drop on the other side. There were also theories about sound. The stone arches and wooded gorge create echoes and acoustic distortions. Some researchers speculated that noises too subtle for humans, perhaps the rush of water, perhaps distant wildlife, might sound amplified or confusing to dogs, agitating them into sudden panic. But for many locals, the scientific explanations never fully erased the bridge's darker reputation. They pointed to the consistency of the leaps, the same spot on the right-hand side, always between the final two parapets. They noted how survivors often tried to leap again if brought back across, and they remembered Overtoun's long-standing lore as a thin place, haunted by the White Lady said to wander the estate. To them, the mystery of the dogs fit seamlessly into the belief that Overtoun Bridge was touched by something otherworldly. The result was a place where science and superstition collided. Researchers brought data, but the community carried memory. And every new leap, every fresh tragedy, seemed to keep both sides alive. Even as scientists offered their explanations, the people of Dumbarton carried stories of their own. For locals, Overtoun Bridge was never just a structure of stone and mortar. It was part of a landscape steeped in grief and folklore, where every tragedy seemed to echo the ones before it. Long before the dogs began leaping, Overtoun House had a reputation for sorrow. In the early 20th century, Lady Overtoun, the widow of John Campbell White, who built the estate, was said to wander the grounds for years after her husband's death. Residents described her as frail and withdrawn, her figure glimpsed moving slowly across the lawns or standing at the bridge as if waiting for someone who never returned. Over time, those sightings merged into legend. The grieving widow became the White Lady of Overtoun, a ghostly figure said to linger at the bridge, bound to it by loss. So when the dogs began to leap, many locals did not see it as a matter of mink or acoustics. They believed the White Lady was still there, her sorrow so heavy it spilled into the world of the living, pulling innocent creatures into her grief. Some said they had seen her form near the parapets on misty days. Others whispered that the dogs were not running toward prey, but toward her, answering a call their owners could not hear. The stories grew as the tragedies mounted. Parents warned children to keep their pets close, repeating tales that had been passed down as cautionary lore. Some families avoided the bridge entirely, choosing longer routes around the gorge rather than risk crossing it. Others treated it with ritual care, pausing at the edge to hold their dogs firmly, some even making the sign of the cross before stepping onto the stones. In Dumbarton, Overtoun Bridge was more than a landmark. It was a place where caution and superstition walked hand in hand. What struck many observers was the persistence of the pattern. Reports often came from the same side of the bridge, the same final two parapets, as if the danger was not random but rooted in that specific spot. And when surviving dogs attempted to leap again, it deepened the sense of something uncanny at work. Science could offer scents, angles, or sounds as partial answers, but it could not explain the consistency or the feeling owners described that their animals seemed to be seized by a force beyond reason. The mystery began to attract not only journalists, but also spiritualists, paranormal investigators, and even theologians. Some claimed the bridge sat on a fault line of energies, a thin place where the boundary between worlds frayed. Others believed it was cursed, that tragedies both human and animal were part of a cycle tied to the land itself. For skeptics, these ideas were little more than folklore. But for those who had lost beloved pets, the explanations brought a measure of meaning to something otherwise unbearable. In the end, Overtoun Bridge became a mirror. To scientists, it reflected the instincts of animals and the quirks of environment. To locals, it reflected sorrow, legend, and the presence of things unseen. And to grieving owners, it reflected the painful truth that sometimes there is no clear answer, only a story that continues, written one leap at a time. For decades, the mystery of Overtoun Bridge centered on dogs alone. But in 1994, the bridge was pulled into an even darker story, one that showed the legend wasn't just about animals. That year, a man named Kevin Moy carried his infant son to the bridge. In a moment of delusion, he threw the child from the parapet, believing he was possessed by the devil. The baby died instantly in the ravine below. Moy then attempted to leap himself, but was restrained and later taken into custody. He was found guilty of manslaughter on the grounds of insanity and sent to a psychiatric hospital. The horror of that act rippled through Scotland. For many, it transformed the bridge from a strange curiosity into a place marked by evil. If animals had been drawn to leap for reasons beyond understanding, then now a human had been compelled to violence on the very same ground. The bridge was no longer just the dog suicide bridge. It was a place where life itself seemed fragile, vulnerable to forces no one could quite name. Local lore only grew stronger. Residents who had once dismissed the dog deaths as coincidence now whispered of something darker at work. The old stories about Overtoun as a thin place were repeated with new urgency. Some claimed the White Lady, said to haunt Overtoun House, was luring both dogs and humans to their deaths. Others spoke of a curse on the land. For the families who lost their pets, and for those who knew of the child who died there, the explanations mattered less than the grief. Overtoun Bridge had become a site of mourning, its stone parapets holding stories no one could forget. As the years went on, Overtoun Bridge became more than just a local curiosity. It became a cultural phenomenon. Newspapers across Scotland ran stories about the dog suicide bridge, and soon the mystery spread internationally. Journalists from the United States, Europe, and beyond traveled to Dumbarton to see the bridge for themselves, often interviewing grieving owners who had lost their pets there. Television followed. Documentaries and paranormal shows featured the bridge, presenting it alongside other so-called cursed locations. Scientific programs tried to replicate the conditions, testing the scent theory or leading dogs across the bridge to observe their reactions. Every experiment seemed to confirm a part of the puzzle, but never the whole. The legend grew in the public imagination. Tourists began making detours to Dumbarton to visit the bridge, drawn not just by its beauty, but by its reputation. Local authorities eventually posted warning signs urging pet owners to leash their dogs when crossing. Even then, incidents continued. For some, the bridge has become a symbol of the unexplained, a reminder that not every mystery can be solved by science alone. For others, it's a case study in how tragedy, rumor, and folklore intertwine, where each new incident reinforces the legend, and the legend itself seems to invite more. Overtoun Bridge today stands as both a monument of Victorian engineering and a place shrouded in unease. To walk across it is to step into a story that has grown over generations, a story where grief, mystery, and folklore refuse to let go. What unsettles me about Overtoun Bridge isn't just the number of dogs lost there. It's the idea of innocence drawn into tragedy. When we talk about hauntings or murders, there's usually some form of human motive, even if we don't understand it. Someone feels anger, jealousy, desperation, or malice, and it spills over into violence. But dogs leaping to their deaths again and again feels different. They don't choose, they don't plot, they don't dwell in fear of the unknown. They live in the moment, and something about this bridge reaches into that moment and turns it fatal. That's what makes the story harder to shake. Science offers us sense, perspectives, acoustics, but even when those explanations make sense, they don't explain the pull that seems to repeat decade after decade, always in the same place. It leaves us with the unsettling idea that landscapes themselves can carry dangers invisible to us, that a place can quietly claim lives over and over without ever revealing why. There's also something profoundly sad about the nature of this tragedy. A dog's trust in its owner is almost unbreakable. They follow us, wait for us, live in rhythm with our voices and movements. To lose that bond not to age, not to sickness, but to a single unexplainable leap, it's grief made heavier by mystery. That's what haunts the owners who cross that bridge and leave without their companions. And that's what lingers in the stories told about Overtoun. That innocence can be taken suddenly, without reason, in a place that should have been safe. Maybe that's why Overtoun Bridge grips us so tightly. It blurs the boundaries between science and superstition, between tragedy and folklore. Some say it's mink, some say it's the White Lady, and some say it's just the cruel coincidence of chance. But whatever the cause, the result is the same. Lives ended, questions left hanging, and a community that has never fully let go of its unease. And maybe that's the deeper fear, the possibility that the world holds forces we can't measure, but that still hold sway over us and the creatures we love. If a place can compel innocence to leap into silence, what else might linger in the landscapes around us, waiting for the right moment to show its hand? That brings us to the end of episode 16 of The Dark Record. We've crossed Overtoun Bridge in Dumbarton, Scotland, a place where beauty and tragedy meet. Hundreds of dogs leaping to their deaths, no clear answers, just a legend that has grown stronger with every passing year. Remembered, retold, and now added to the record. Next time, we'll step into one of Europe's strangest unsolved mysteries. A boy who appeared in 1828 with no past, no family, and no explanation for who he was or where he came from. We'll explore The Riddle of Caspar Hauser. Until then, I'm Lyle Perez, and this has been the Halloween podcast presenting The Dark Record. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps keep the show alive and weird. You can also explore sources, extras, and more at our Facebook page at facebook.com/The Halloween Podcast or at our website, thehalloweenpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the mystery isn't in what we see, but in what keeps repeating. Have a good night.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing facility, he knows keeping the line up and running is a top priority. That's why he chooses Grainger. Because when a drive belt gets damaged, Grainger makes it easy to find the exact specs for the replacement product he needs. And next-day delivery helps ensure he'll have everything in place and running like clockwork. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.